For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. That's Scripture's way of telling us that sometimes the evil we face is more than what appears on the surface. Sometimes evil hides in plain sight, but it can't hide forever because it always reveals itself in patterns. Deceit, blame, rage-bait, meant to pull you from truth into an uncontrolled reactionary state. History proves this. After the Great Fire of Rome in AD 64, public fear and suspicion were everywhere. Ancient sources, especially Tacitus, say Nero shifted blame onto Christians, an already vulnerable and unpopular group. And their suffering became political cover for somebody else's crisis. The details around Nero's responsibility for that fire are disputed, but the scapegoating pattern is the point. Create fear, redirect blame, and weaponize accusation. You could call it political warfare. I call it spiritual warfare. And the Christians were targeted because hell has always worked this way. Provoke chaos, assign false blame, and crush people under accusation. Paul says this, we wrestle not against flesh and blood. In other words, don't be naive or think superficially. While the faces may change, the patterns of evil stay the same. And if you never recognize those patterns, if you never put two and two together, you will end up joining the evil. The Bible is a book of love, but it's not a book about mindless innocence. God doesn't call you to be clueless, but he does call you to be wise. Because what gets in your heart doesn't just stay there. It becomes your words, your choices, your behavior patterns. I worked as a behavior therapist and earned an EDS in EdPsych. People get predictable. Behavior patterns repeat. And that's bad news for the "we are so slick" crowd. Your little two-step might be surprising or hidden at first, but the behavior patterns reveal themselves over time. Now meet Evy Pompouras, former Secret Service agent, highly decorated, sharp on threat assessment and reading behavior. She's asked about bad personas. What?
There's two types of personas to be careful of. People who are extremely self-righteous and people who use justification. Let me start with justification. When I did interviews, polygraphs, I would interview people who did really horrible things. And can I tell you, they would almost always justify it. We would have the saying, any person can do anything at any given moment in time, given the opportunity. Because you can justify it to yourself. Justification is very dangerous because you use that to justify you doing something bad, or somebody else will use that to justify harming you. At the end of the day, what you're doing is horrible. Just be aware of that. You're just justifying it to yourself.
One of the two bad personas uses justification. What's wrong with justification? Evy says it's dangerous because you use that to justify you doing something bad, but someone else will use that to justify harming you. At the end of the day, what you're doing is horrible. Just be aware of that. Scripture backs that up. Proverbs 4:23 says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it.
The other persona to watch for is self-righteous. That is huge. So that's the I am holier than thou, I know better, I'm above you. With self-righteousness, it's like you believe you're so right, and that's rigidity. That when you think, no, I'm so right, let me tell you how right I am. Red flags. And look at how people treat other people, because if they gossip about other people, they treat other people the wrong way, I promise you, they're doing the same thing to you or will do the same thing to you.
What about a group that follows the behavior patterns of all three bad personas, intensely using justification, self-righteousness, and gossip? That would be the mother of all bad personas, wouldn't it? We must be careful to prevent the evil patterns of justification, self-righteousness, and gossip taking root in our own lives, and we must quickly spot them in others, because if we're not discerning, we'll treat those patterns as merely quirks of personality, rather than what they actually are, big red flags. That's someone whose influence can lead you into spiritual darkness. The question is, how do those patterns get a hold of us? One way is that manipulators try to put us in an unhealthy state of mind. That has been the pattern through history, and it is no different today. The moment your emotions get flooded so hard that your discernment drops and you stop responding like yourself, you are vulnerable to those lying, manipulative voices and their behavior patterns. Here's Lise Leblanc, therapist and mental health educator, on how manipulators keep people in an emotional fog.
Number 7 is the level of emotional manipulation. Sociopaths aim to keep their victims in a constant state of heightened emotions to keep them confused and cloud their judgment so that they don't have the ability to think rationally.
Lise says, sociopaths aim to keep their victims in a constant state of heightened emotions to keep them confused and cloud their judgment. Have you ever watched someone engage in or advocate for that pattern of behavior? Can you please try to harass someone for me? That's not a bad request. It's 2026. Time's up for lying voices. If we can't name the things they do, we can't stop them. So let's name those things. That state of heightened emotions that Lise is referring to is something I've playfully called the state of derp. What is the state of derp? The state of derp is a triggered state of mind in which your emotions are so high that your cognition and rationality took a major hit. The scariest thing about sociopaths is their ability to induce a state of derp in others. In a state of derp, you can be brainwashed and become addicted to the brainwashing. The human mind was not designed to be emotionally flooded all the time. You can be pushed to your breaking point and then snap. You can be forced to act out of character. The infantile trick of triggering you is nevertheless powerful. Those huge emotional spikes spread like bed bugs into your nervous system, and so these things happen. The key point here is your body obeys them, even when your mind doesn't. New term, moronitis. Moronitis is what is produced by people who are in a deep state of derp. You ever meet somebody so deep in confusion, they got all kinds of confidence? That's moronitis. They don't know nothing, but they don't know it loudly. I know I's a Christian, but what's wrong with trial by social media? I may be a licensed psychiatrist, but I still don't know why cluster Bs need to be diagnosed and medicated. I'm a lawyer, but why do people bother with a prosecution and defense? It should only be prosecution. Mosaic law? What's that? Laws from 1300 BC were too liberal, bro. I'm more of a 1400 BC kind of a guy, bro. I had my sense of justice so heroically kicked into 1400 BC, bro. But I wanted that. This is what happens when someone else emotionally sabotages you. This is what you produce. It's what I produced when the behavior pattern pushed me. All 4 of these people are probably intelligent, rational, and have a good character. But here they are reduced to dummies because their cognition took a major hit. Anyway, moronitis is actually quite dangerous because it spreads easily, which is an obvious problem when it comes to social media and the creation of mobs. When you hear from someone as you are emotionally tripping, and they are experiencing the same strong emotions along with you, you can end up spiraling. My question to you is, what if all 4 people were sitting in the same room together? What would get produced? Giant gobs of moronitis. This is why we as Christians need a metacognitive pause. What would Jesus do? That's metacognition. Would Christ approve of the things I'm saying and doing? Lying voices instinctively spike your emotions to rob you of your consent. They turn your whole nervous system against you, then try to pass their voice off as your ideas, because they've spent years learning how to exploit emotional vulnerabilities. Pause when they do that. The trigger-focused behavior pattern is a mark of an exploiter. It is a byproduct of their pathological control freak nature. Some voices don't love you. They use you. So if you're thinking, wow, they really got a rise out of that person, check yourself, because they may be getting a rise out of you too, just in a different way. And they do not speak honestly. The justifier behavior pattern links up with the false victim behavior pattern. There are many justifiers justifying in the victim Olympics. You know the only reason why I'm doing X, Y, and Z? Because this one person did so many cruel, horrible things to me. So many. I could list them endlessly. Well, who was this bad person who enacted such cruelty upon you? Oh, the guy who won the Caring Heart Award in high school did it to me. But let me tell you, while he can be nice, he has this other, truly awful side he could not be reasoned with. No, that's projection. Those of us who run high in empathy don't also simultaneously run low in empathy. You can talk things out with people who are highly empathetic. The behavior pattern of lying voices, on the other hand, is decidedly not that. A related term you need to know is reactive abuse. The abuser will abuse the victim for hours, days, weeks, or years, until the victim finally reaches a breaking point and reacts. The abuser then flips the story, portraying themselves as the victim and convincing others that the other person, the real victim, is insane and abusive. The heartbreaking truth is that people usually believe the abuser. The victim feels shame and self-blame for reacting, instead of understanding that their reaction was a natural defense to long-term emotional and psychological abuse. Not everything is as it seems. Some abusers spend a lifetime successfully manipulating others, without many victims and observers ever realizing it. Well, why would that be? Because the abuser knows what they're doing. The other two people do not know and are reacting in shock. Why do people who engage in this behavior claim victimhood? To extract things from you that you otherwise would never willingly give them. To rob you of consent. If they walked around dead honest like, I have been harassing, I have been gaslighting, I have been bullying, you would distance yourself. Instead, they create distortions of truth and reveal their true nature through the advice they give you, all of which has a certain stink to it. Their advice reeks of justification, a lack of remorse and empathy, self-righteousness, a trigger focus, gossip, passive aggression, gaslighting, we are so slick, and criminality. Criminality is actually a sign of the highest intelligence, as well as other forms of moral corruption. Also, it's a bad sign if someone else is getting cult-like behavior out of you and bonding over your compliance with their trigger focus. But here's the bad news for the "we are so slick" crowd. Building upon lies means your foundation is forever crumbling. Let's call it a house of cards. It falls apart. Reality can't wait to give the game away. Lies cannot stand on their own. A lie never demonstrated a person's true temperament on a minute-to-minute basis. It can only ever manage perception. That's why what's built on lies must constantly be defended, constantly be spun, must constantly be BS'd, whereas the truth stands under its own power. This is one of the biggest reasons why manipulative lying voices work so hard to keep you and others overwhelmed emotionally. Clear thinking is a threat to their deceptions. If they can keep you confused, rushed, angry, in a rage, or unhinged, they can delay the moment that reality catches up, but they cannot stop it forever. Once the fog lifts, their behavior patterns become obvious. In Ephesians, Paul doesn't just warn us about the battle. He tells us to stand up. He says, put on the whole armor of God. If the enemy's tactic is deception, then the first piece of armor is truth. If the enemy's tactic is accusation, let the righteous level the playing field to provide a comprehension of truth, not urgent vengeance. Do any of you dare to take the breastplate of righteousness and align yourself with Christ? If the enemy's tactic is to steal your peace by throwing your emotional state into a chaos that features strong emotions, then you need your feet fitted with the gospel of peace. And when the fog tries to return, when fear, rage, and urgency are used to try to hack your brain. Raise the shield of faith and put on the helmet of salvation. And Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free."